Alrighty, it doesn't seem that anyone's feeding in right now, so we'll get on with the show. We're going to start off with a presentation from our senior programmer, Fabian, who's here in the chat. He'll be going over the map layout overhaul that he has planned, which was part of the roadmap that we released earlier in the week. And then after that, we'll be going through questions that you guys asked us. Like I said, I don't have answers for all of them, but we've got them on file. And if we do have time, then we'll have like a free sort of Q&A. Since we do have some developers here who might be able to answer some of the questions, that might be a good time to re-ask them, perhaps. But take it away, Fabian.
Hi everybody. So I hope you will enjoy what I will show you. This has been like a couple months of work that has been delayed by the B18 issues. So I hope you're gonna enjoy that and basically have a nice view on what we are doing for the future. So first things first, I would like to introduce some terms in order to have a good understanding of what we are going to speak about. So when I will speak about world, it will consist into the Unreal data of the world, and basically what you mostly edit in modding SDK. The world layer is not the layer of the gameplay, but one of the filtering layer of the world composer in that presentation, and obviously the world settings are the settings associated with the world. And for general terms, so I will speak about maps for what we describe as a map in common games, but we tend to mix up with layer. So maps is specifically a geometrical layer, like a setup like Albastro. Layer is exclusively the world layer, which is on top of a map. So where you will find spawners, hubs, vehicles, and stuff. Skew world settings is basically our class which inherit from world settings, which we were used to set teams and a lot of different rules of the game. Skew map list is obviously our list of layers associated with a map. Teams are our factions, like US Insurgents and Militia, and Skew team info is our legacy class, which was holding all the information about US factions or Insurgent. And for those who don't know, we'll speak about UI for user interface and chunking for the pack file system, which cut the game into smaller files for Steam updates. So first thing first, we had like a lot of technical depth into.
Holy shit, guys! Why is there so many of you right now?
So what?
Oh, good day, by the way.
No, it's fine.
Yeah,
Alright.
we're having a roundtable at the moment. Please don't interrupt.
So we had a technical depth, which means that you had to load entire maps to change layers, team, and game modes, and it ended up into being a bottleneck in your workflow and also in your workflow as modders. So the team info also is a big bottleneck in terms of balancing, because if you are several people working on the same project, most of them will have to modify that file, which is an issue both for merge and for flexibility of testing different setups. And finally, the UI is basically referencing every vehicle and deployable of the game. So it's kind of annoying to have to load the whole set of data just for opening the radial menu of the game. All of that got some exponential effect on the game. So we are now like more than 100 layers as a vanilla game. If you add on top of that any mod layers, it makes a challenge for server owners to manage this map rotation. This is also exhausting to modify just one spawner on maps. It will imply that you will have to open all maps, modify it, save, and go to the next one. So it's really exhausting both for you as modders as it is for us. Like you wouldn't believe how late Fuzzed was working late to just modify some helicopter spawner. It's kind of unthinkable. And also, both you and us have to ship layers to ship any new factions, and also we have problems into balancing stuff over time, because any change that we have to make, in example, one vehicle will have to be modified on all these. So, yeah. So what was made was basically cutting down to world settings and breaking it up in two files. So now maps don't reference anymore team's vehicle, and in the future they won't reference anymore deployables. So they load way faster just by not loading vehicles right now, nor teams. Maps mods will be simpler, because you will, as a mapper, you will have just to publish your map, and you could let other people make layers for it. Or alternatively, you can make like some kind of template or early layers and let other people iterate on it. You will be able to do that kind of things. You will also be able to make layer mods from vanilla map or from any other modders map easier, because you will just have to drop one file, which is a SKU layer, and set up your separate rules for that game. And finally, that SKU layer will control which faction setup will spawn. So it means that we can have one layer which is compatible with all factions of the game, including modded ones. So that will greatly simplify integration of modding factions in the future, and also avoid modders to have to worry about deploying their layer for Canadian Force, in example. Also, we break up team info into parts. So now you can mod vanilla factions, and you can do sub factions. By sub factions, we have an example in that document, 1st Infantry Division or 3rd Armor Division. So you will be able to do, let's say, an infantry only faction setup, or an armor only faction setup in a more cleaner way than before. And necessarily you won't have a mandatory path to create a layer for it. So you could have basically a layer which is set up to be compatible for all armored faction setup, and anyone which is made either in mod or in vanilla will be able to spawn on it. So that's what we intend to do. So that's already a big thing. And to save time, both for our internal production and to modders, we added a lot of automatic checkings. So that means that, in example, you won't be able to save, in example, vehicle settings which fail to reference a vehicle, or in example, lack some field. So you won't be able to save, and it will tell you in the game message log what is wrong with your settings. So it will make iteration way faster, and it make for us whitelisting way easier, because we could trust this data in first place, and also we could add on top of that additional validators in order to to validate that you use our common settings of balance. And finally, the key element of all of that is a new unified availability system for basically every gameplay element. So you specify them in one faction setup. It is basically an element which is a node in order to set up condition to unlock or scale the number of available vehicle, roles, or deployables. So it's designed in order to be simpler to use and to use presets. So an example in the game, you will have a maximum tank count for let's say irregular faction, and the same for conventional faction. Or you will have, let's say, armored factions tank count. So you will have an easier time setting up all of that without having to constantly duplicate data from vanilla factions. So we'll deploy that in phases. So in the roadmap, you have seen that there is like 3 different steps which are planned. In fact, we have way more steps internally than that, and we have a lot of things that will be rolling on in parallel of these layer overall steps. Thing is, our fair estimate is we'll take at least 3 releases of the game to unveil everything. But what we have right now in current process of validation by our QA and basically polishing is the initial version which will bring all the data shame. So you'll be able to build up data for your mods before even all these systems get active. And vehicle will be from day one available on that system, and new level and layer system. So you will already get the benefit of saving your loading time into maps, and also to not anymore publish thousands of layers just to set up all factions. Then we'll get deployable, and supposedly we'll get role support. So we will see, depending on how we can parallelize production, if we'll get commander or role support, but that's the plan from now. Also, we have a voting system, which will be corresponding to the choice of level and layer and factions in different steps of the game, or potentially triggered by admins. And that voting system will be also available for modders, so you will be able to, let's say, make a new vote into the gameplay for switching your next objective to attack, or let's say trigger specific events or commander actions. And finally, the layer additive loading, which will enable us to make some funny stuff, like having more variation in terms of weather or time of the day, and potentially evolution in the term of having, let's say, one match played with the city entirely clean, and second match played with the city destroyed. In the future, depending on how we evolve, you may be able to do that inside the game by some kind of interrupting event. So what came as a bonus? So as I said, maps loads way faster. We and you will not need anymore to touch UI when working on new factions. We have a civilian faction which is set up right now. So depending on how we will work with QA, this will be available for you. We've done a preliminary work in order to support more than 2 teams in the game. So again, it's kind of preparing work for Insurgent game mode. There was like not much validation and test on that, but we made sure that everything in the code from now on will be available to support N team. And also, we can release the whole data shame and every future data shame that we'll have in the game way before we release update, because it won't be anymore into blueprint but in data asset. So it won't be affecting the game before we want to. And also, we now have seeding possibilities thanks to the scaling of availability system. So it can scale against player count, against one team player count, against one squad player count, can scale against tickets, against anything basically. And I think it's kind of redundant to my presentation, so you will have access to that slide after that talk. And finally, what's coming next? So we have like 2 iterations on the voting system because one is highly dependent on the layer asynchronous loading. So we'll have a first iteration without that, which will be simply voting for next layer at end of match, or supposedly anytime trigger it, and voting for faction at start of match. You won't be able to vote for faction in middle of the match at the beginning. So layer additive loading, as I spoke before, will be basically modifying the way we use the new data system. So the skew level, we hold the geometrical layer, so basically the visual setup, and then the skew layer will possibly hold some time of day or weather layer, and also some swapped geometry as you at your convenience. And obviously, still the gameplay. Ideally, we would like to be able to swap in middle of a match, so you could have like some kind of game event, like destroying a bridge or stuff like that. Voting system V2, obviously, and finally, something that might be coming not forcefully after all of that, but sometimes would be the ability to change player balancing, so having asymmetric teams. And the last cookie would be basically the game mode overall. So what you see here as a layer overall, we're gonna do something as important for the game mode in order to have more flexibility into our future game modes and your future game mode also. And I think we're gonna went to the whole presentation. So that's all for me. If you have question, I don't know if Crispy want to start up with question of.
Yeah, actually, because that was so intense, what I'll do is I'll link to the presentation right now. I'll put that in voice chat for people to look over or reference for any questions you may have for Fabian right now. As that was, I imagine, quite a lot to take in.
Well, yeah, okay, nice. Be unmuted. So, do you want to, Crispy, do you have any questions planned now, or are we going to the question pre-written? Or?
No, I'm just wondering if anybody here has any questions specifically for Fabian of what he just presented before we get to the questions that were sent in.
I've got a question actually.
Go ahead.
The voting system you just touched upon, is that something that we would have to run on our servers, or would we be able to bypass that, say if we didn't want to do voting?
So basically, anything in that kind of system, like voting system or any similar stuff, will be from now on always having a setting for a server owner to lock or unlock it. And from its construction, it's designed in order that you can even set up your server in order that only admins participate to the vote, or only members, or everybody, or just one team. Like, you will be able to tweak that kind of things.
Okay, cool.
I have a question. So with the new level and layer system that you just detailed, when will the documentation and like tutorials be published showing map makers how to successfully develop using the new system?
So we definitely will create documentation. That's the plan. Now for video and stream, I think we discussed a lot about it internally. Now as you can see, we are quite busy with pushing updates and content. So we have dedicated people to do them right now. So hopefully, yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I have an additional question.
Go ahead.
When you were talking about swapping the factions and on a layer, like having a template, how is maybe we won't know because it's early, but I was looking at like something like the unconventional factions are much different from the conventional factions, and even within the conventional factions, sometimes balance between vehicles of similar types are odd. Like I know Lashkar right now, people are complaining about a balance with a Bradley versus some 30 mils, which on paper they're similar, but they need a BMP on the Russian side, or vice versa. So can we be asymmetric with those, or is that still in development?
So you will be able to be even more asymmetric than we are right now. The way it will work is we will assign a tag to a faction setup, like it could be an armored faction, an infantry only, or let's say mechanized infantry. And what we would like to enforce is balancing between a consistent balancing between all armored faction or all mechanized infantry factions. So as it will be balanced out of the map, then it will be up to you to select, okay, I want team 1 to be armored and team 2 to be infantry only. And then you will have that kind of control into your layer.
Okay.
I have a question. So the entire new level and layer system, what will it mean to existing mods that are already published? Like how much of an effort is it going to be to transition?
So to give you an idea, it took me basically, let's say 3 hours to update all the layer of our current game when I had to. Just to update a couple spawner on the map. Because that's one thing that you have to modify on the map itself. It's only a helicopter spawner and Minsk motorbike spawner. That's only thing that you have to modify on the map itself. Then in terms of factions, right now we are looking into making tools to automatize the migration for team info. But in worst case scenario, you will have to basically spend time to recreate role settings, which took me again 3 to 4 hours into redoing the American function.
So I have a follow-up question for that.
Yeah.
So right now I'm around halfway through doing the geometry layer. Will the documentation in the system be ready in time, to develop for this new system, so I won't have to convert?
So what we aim is to publish data Shem as soon as possible. So basically, you will have the ability to prepare your mod from the book way before we publish the actual update which use it. So that's the target. We are still working towards it, and so this data will probably be available with incomplete documentation at the beginning, and then we'll build it up following your feedback and our internal deployment. Because even internally we have let's say an experimental branch, but we haven't deployed it into all our teams yet.
Okay, thank you.
I definitely think since this is going to be almost like an iterative deployment in stages, that you guys get to try it out, and we internally going to use it also. So having a more of a feedback loop there with you modders would be very beneficial for both you guys and us in terms of being able to find smarter solutions and just how the use cases for you guys are.
We really look into a collaboration with you as modder. Like in example, if one settings which came across all our tests start to provoke crash, we look into your feedback to add it to the validation process. And also, in example, if you feel like some error that is thrown by the validator system is unclear, we'll work together in order to make this SDK a very comfortable setup to work.
Excellent. Were there any more questions?
I got a last one.
Yep.
Like, still regarding the layer and map thing, like, am I still able, when I create a map, to directly in one mod push like 5 gameplay layers for it? Or do I have to make like separate mods out of that?
So basically, you can do that no problem. You can push layer and level together. We'll work into being able to push layer without level. Like we need to validate a lot of things into modding in order to make sure that we don't have any more crash into the system related to asset overlapping. So in terms of layer, yes, you will be able to ship layer and even faction inside the same mod package. Now, I would recommend, because of our late issues with asset overlapping, to separate factions and maps in 2 different modes.
Okay, thanks.
Can I ask a quick question about the civilian factions?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
As someone who is not nearly as creative as the most people in this room, I just use mods to host events for the community I'm part of. Seeing a civilian faction and more than one team is, I mean, great. We've been hoping for that for ages. So that's brilliant. Is there any plans on anything which will allow comms to be heard across multiple teams as well?
So thing is, the civilian faction came from a technical possibility and in some way a necessity because of Jensen Round. So we made it. They are kind of just coming from programmer side, you know. So it has not been into first hands yet. And as a conclusion, we haven't let's say expanded into all related change, like making a civilian able to speak to everybody on the map or stuff like that. So it's not yet done. It's gonna be designed because Fuzz is really into making that insurgency game mode overall. So probably coming, but I can't be affirmative on that.
All good. Thank you very much.
So I have one last question. So I'm developing my map for my squad group, the Devil's Brigade, and we want to run the map on our official server. I understand that whitelisting has been slowed down because of the shader core crash and other issues in the past that you mentioned. Oh, and that you mentioned that whitelisting has gotten easier. My question is, what challenges do you anticipate in future whitelisting, and how will that affect the amount of mods that get whitelisted in the next few months?
We'll probably address this together later.
Perfect. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Any more questions regarding to Fabian in terms of the layer overhaul?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I have a quick question regarding modifications to. I'm sorry if this was covered. Modifications to balance tweaks for existing game modes. So, for instance, cap timers on territory control or the size of cap points, stuff like that. Is that something that you plan on adding levers to, or is that something that would require a mod to change?
So right now, thing is, we create an enormous data shame possibility, but we basically will bring stuff into that data shame in a shoot and scoot manner. So depending on our internal request or model request, we will migrate some settings from blueprints or legacy game modes into let's say layer or level data. So I can say yes, but it's just not clearly planned right now. It's planned that we do such things, but we haven't pulled the trigger on it yet.
Okay, were there any more questions? Nope. Alrighty. Let's move on then to the questions you guys asked beforehand. Some of them may have been explored with the presentation. But let's start with I have Hawk's questions of are there any alternatives to the whitelist method of adding mods to the licensed server browser being seriously considered? So what issues with the current whitelist method are they looking to solve? So we are exploring a few different possibilities internally and reviewing those. But there's things like the technical limitations, game stability, and core game impact, moderation, things like that. So we're not entirely sure where we'll land on this, but we'll be communicating any changes to whitelists when they happen, and especially to you guys.
We do have had several meetings on this now.
Yeah.
In terms of this and reviewing our whitelisting process in general, and I think a lot of questions regarding to this, as most of you know, and this is probably the biggest pressure point in terms of modding, which is the whole whitelisting and how our server browser is set up and all that. And I think that there is basically one major technical issue we have for changing that, and that is the what Fabian could maybe talk more in terms of cross-referencing, mods crashing. Maybe Fabian can explain more of that first.
Yeah, so basically, the whitelisting process was there in order to ensure that you had like a quality experience into whitelisted mod server. So in the long term, what is a goal for us is to no more separate entirely into a secondary server browser and have basically, instead of a mechanism of whitelisted and non-whitelisted server, having something like highlighted mods and let's say quality approved mods, but not as much as right now separate them. So
yeah, the issues that we haven't been able to use, like toss it out right now, is that we have crashes related to that.
Yeah.
But I think we first probably will go on to a testing period for it, as long as we can address these technical concerns that we have. But I think in terms of like a direction we're going with it is definitely more in terms of letting modding be open, in terms of the server browser, letting the licensed servers be able to host mods. That's kind of the direction we have settled on. But that's not meaning that it's a given right now, because there is some serious concerns regarding the stability of the game with modding right now. So we have to address some of that stuff before we can let it out, let it be free. So, but that's the overall direction.
So basically, you need to verify. You need to get a process in place to get the mods more like more
Yeah,
stable.
I think well, I'm not 100% sure of the technical side in this, but I think Fabian will addressing some of these issues with the layer overhaul.
So I can say that everything in terms of whitelisting a mod right now is manual. And that's an issue for us because as you are more and more to make quality mods with more and more content, it's exponential amount of work. And we are looking into automatizing a lot of this process. So validators in layer overall are consistent balancing settings is another part. And then it's just about technical issues. So we have like three axes of progression to basically progress in order to be able to move forward into the whitelisting process.
Okay.
I think there's the sense that whitelisting was a decent idea, and then it was a fair shot at having a system where we can really showcase good mods and letting the general public have access to high quality mods. But what we realize, of course, is that it's not as stable as we wanted in terms of our ability to sustain steady cadence. So we would like to have it to work in the first place, but we do it now. Three mods whitelisted in 6 months is not a good look, and it's not working as intended.
I completely get the position you're in, but thank you for working on it and still keeping whitelisting an option once you get there.
And I think, yes, as Fabian also, we have a bunch of different options to go here in terms of how we want to, because we still want to highlight mods and we still want to kind of put forward mods that are, I would say, maybe highlighting what we want the game to be, maybe in terms of mods that help with teamwork, communication, and kind of builds on our core pillars of the game. So the general public have a boosted experience almost for that. But we also there's modding is kind of a beast of its own in terms of that it's almost impossible to know which mods become popular because there's so much variety in them that it's kind of hard for us to kind of cherry pick that in a manner. So yeah, that's kind of a change in terms of what we said before. Something that we really want to try out. We might need to make sure that this is stable, that we don't end up with releasing mods to the general public in a very open way, but then having massive issues with game stability. Because the player experience joining the game needs to be stable. That needs to kind of trickle down in terms of modding also. Mods, is kind of unstable by nature. It's hard to find any game that has modding that is, has 100% stable modding. But that there is not like game level there. That would be our most important part in keeping the kind of integrity of the game stable, at least.
Also, that's why in the technical department we went into breaking down as much as possible mods between like levels, layer, and factions, so we can more easily control. It's less complex to basically control two variables individually rather than having to control the mix-up. So that's one of the approach to make things simpler. So
any other questions regarding whitelisting?
Yes,
we did have a couple, but they've actually been answered here. But if anyone's got one right now, go ahead.
I would got one. First of all, what you're planning to do sounds totally amazing. Thank you. The question is, I don't know how long this process will take, and we got like mods that are ready, like even for a long time ready. So will you keep on the old process till we reach the point that whitelisting gets like sorted out?
This might be a combined question between me and maybe Karm in terms of and some other factors. Basically, we have I say 95% of the technical side that already there in terms of being able to enable mods for licensed servers. What we probably will need to is have more of a disclaimer that you are joining a modded server in terms of when you are joining. And we also need to find a way to make sure that multi mods do not crash the client. And that has been our biggest concern for. Yeah. But in terms of you have to understand the timing for us here is kind of critical in terms of we have been talking about this for I think two last months. We definitely picked up the conversation internally. But you might realize looking at the roadmap that we are really, really close to exiting early access now. we are 150 and 200% like focused now in terms of that. So this is more like we really want to make this happen fast, so we don't like delay this even more, because we know like this has been a long time since we've been able to whitelist mods. But I think we have we need to make sure that we have the manpower to kind of integrate all these last changes in terms of community guidelines for like servers and setting up that, and there's a bit of other technical side that needs to go with it. Maybe Carm can, yeah.
As well. So, our initial discussion was: are we going for a significant change of whitelisting, or are we going to stick with whitelisting as it is? That discussion on a fundamental level has leaned towards changing it in regards to making allowing more mods in the general server browser. However, since that point, we have pretty much discovered the technical issue that was mentioned earlier, which with regards to mod stability. There are situations in which mods can cause crashes or even break other mods that are otherwise relatively okay built. So there are going to be workarounds shared, I think, in a tutorial fashion that will hopefully give you some pointers for things to, like, practices to avoid. And we are internally working on an automated system, which Fabian was talking about, to hopefully automate that so that you don't have to do a lot of manual work on that. Unfortunately, until that issue is resolved, our hands are essentially tied. Even for the mods that are already whitelisted, it is, I believe, possible for them to for some of them to crash each other. I'm not entirely sure on the specifics, but it's a pretty annoying issue, and we really need to get that sorted before we can go on with either of those. Beyond that, manpower is a bit of a factor as well, and to your benefit, it's probably costing us less manpower to be opening up more rather than to be more stringent about whitelisting. So we are going to try and go for a form of whitelisting, or a form of validation, if you will, that is more bare bones, more focused on stability and less on performance, less on quality per se. But we do need to have a way to get that basic stability that we require for us in order to be able to go on with that.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Carmen Zena. Next question we had was from Beefy. And he says, does OWI plan on keeping the SDK updated for any new big patches? Yes, actually, looking at the internal calendar right now, we do have plans to have the SDK out, but maybe Calm has more info there.
I think
on...
planning a release, but the release has been pushed a little bit, so we might be a bit delayed with that. But I mean, we intend to be pushing it every release at the very least.
Then we had a question from Dan Deman. Does OWI plan to make the SDK a priority and keep us updated on issues that happen and make it a high priority fix for them? So the modding SDK is always a big priority. And we continue to pull off our best dev from the test to fix issues like the shader core issue. And Fabian's added here, we've had like a third to half of the team working on it full time since beta 18, fixing issues. And again, he's put a tough cookie. That's twice a cookie from Fabian today.
Because basically we didn't add only one issue, but we had like a succession of issues, which at the beginning are all mixed together. So it's really a complex problem, and I can tell you that we put every energy we can to fix it. If not for you, just because we publish the CAF, and CAF has exactly the same issue as you have as modders. So we're really strong into fixing that as a high priority.
Another question we had was from Devil's D. Are there plans to fix the custom player controller voice chat / admin permission bug when moving from a vanilla layer to a modded layer that has a custom player controller? If there is not, why is it not being addressed? Fabian put an answer in here and says, as far as he knows, there's no plan specifically aimed at the issue because player controller is so central that touching it is almost as critical as an engine update. But that said, we plan to clean systems, and the player controller is on our radar. So when we know about it, but we're not there yet. Anything else to add there, gents?
I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah, just in case. Any follow-up questions? Buff asked, will OWI let us build certain branches of certain versions of Squad? Unfortunately not, since this is impossible for security and cost reasons. We also don't have the spare capabilities in reviewing external changes. Moving on, we had a question from Spectre Eternal. Will there be a switch off the NVIDIA physics plugin for UE4 upon which the vehicle physics were built? And does OWI consider using Havoc engine as a replacement? Fabian put in here, he might switch to Chaos together with some engine update in the future, but in the field of engine upgrade, we don't plan for any of that right now. And then we got a fun.
I just said thank you because that was my question.
Oh, okay. No worries.
Yeah, I got you. Thank you very much.
Then I had a bunch more whitelisting questions come in, but I think we've covered those. Just about the automation and the current state of whitelisting and what we plan to do. And then we had about mods conflicting and breaking each other. Calm was able to talk about that just now. And then Pyrokills asked, are there any plans to implement stronger QA processes towards the SDK and modding in general as to ensure issues like the dreaded shader core issue and this new crash with loading conflicts are less likely to manifest themselves? And I believe was that part of your what you were talking about, Fabian, the checks for when saving?
Yeah, we look forward to basically work extensively with basically validators and unit testing. So we supposedly, if everything goes as we want, we will be able to catch this kind of issue way faster and treat them also more efficiently. So we really work into that direction, but it's not available yet. But we are working into that direction.
I think the point there is that we don't want you guys to almost have the ability to break stuff in terms of that. We want to make sure that there are checks there before you're even able to commit broken stuff. I think that's our kind of end goal there. So yeah, not having broken ref loaded.
And then we had two questions coming from Smed. Are there plans to further develop AI in the SDK or Squad in general? At the moment, no. Just to be blunt about it. And then, can the EQS system be enabled? And Fabian has put in, we will not risk enabling such a system unless we have a good reason to.
We did enable EQS. I'm 100% sure that we did at some point. If that was disabled again later, then that is something that has changed.
There might be a cause for that.
Could have been, but yeah, we enabled that last summer. Sure, yeah.
Okay.
But I'm not sure if that has been disabled again. That could have happened with the engine upgrade or something else.
Yeah, I was looking for it in the SDK when I was working on my AI for Squad Z, and I couldn't find it there. But I'm relatively new to the system myself, so it could be me.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I was very, I basically double check that happened back in last sometime. But yeah.
Oh, fair enough. Alrighty, that's all the questions I was able to get answers for. But we do have like 10 minutes left of the planned time. So if there are any further questions people do want to ask while you're here, please one by one. Anyone want to go first?
Fabian, I have a question. What did you mean by EQS as a risk?
So basically, in terms of software management, any kind of system that you add to the equation is a factor of risk. So if any system of the Unreal Engine is not activated yet, its activation could cause us a full month of problems. So for this exact reasons, we don't activate anything that will be shipped with a new Unreal Engine update unless we are forced to, or we have a need to, or maybe a request to do it, and we are able to basically have a QA stamp on it. But by default, we practice the policies of by default closing doors rather than opening all doors. It's the safest way to progress.
I have one in relation to the new way layers are going to work in whitelisting. So it sounds like we're getting to a point where if we're modifying base content and it passes your validation, it might be automatically whitelisted. Am I misunderstanding that?
So what we can say right now is like we could almost have some process internally to have in terms of gameplay and crash-proof validation. So it's basically 80% of what would be our whitelisting process in the future. So we still look into discussing with our QA, and we'll discuss also with you as a modding community in order to automate it as much as we can. But I can't be affirmative that it will be automatized as itself. Thing is like a mod of a map basically will always need still an extensive testing in order to verify for collider and stuff, whereas like a factions is more technical and more easy to validate by automated testing. So that's not a strong answer, but we're going to that direction, but not yet.
Thank you. And a follow-up maybe with that. With that possibility in mind, one of the things that has come up is like my group, and I know a couple of other people here, they'll put up just a small community event, you know, switched factions or switched points. It sounds like if we're using a base layer with base factions, that maybe that'll be okay. But with points, I could see that maybe being a different thing. Like if I go and move capture points or, you know, change the flow through the map, that might be a deeper issue.
So you're speaking about moving basically capture point during a match?
Yeah, so right now, say we have AAS version 1 and we are RAS version 1, we have our clusters, right? There are certain points. I want to take a point from one, move it to another, or I want to create a new point somewhere else on the map.
So basically, it's more game mode related issues rather than layers, and that's the whole refactor and overall that we plan to do after the layer overall. So I can't promise anything yet into that field, but we are strongly thinking about touching the graph node system and the way game mode behave as a inside one match. The ability to be more flexible into game modes and capture point, but that's not yet on the. It's still on the drawing board right now.
Yeah, can I just chime in on that just to push home that I know a lot of server owners would be very, very happy if they could edit the layers in a sense where they didn't have to go into a mod to create new capture points, as he has mentioned, and you could just, I don't know how you would do it, if you just have a million different pre-baked capture points that a configuration would allow or something like that. But yeah, the value of that is massive for a lot of server owners.
Yeah. To be fair, my understanding of the problem is that we have this capture point into basically an enormous bucket, which is a map right now, which is a heavy thing to edit. So we are first moving into making that edition to be something more light, because it will be into an isolated layer that you can control in separate manner. So something more lighter to edit and more easy to edit. Then this kind of thing could be totally ending up in a totally separate file from the map, which just say which coordinate of the map you want your capture point. So again, it's on the drawing board. This is identified as an issue, and we'll work on it at some point.
Fabian, I think you might have the question wrong, actually. I think he was speaking about he was speaking about that server owners would very appreciate the ability to modify to create map layers or like modify existing layers without actually using mod SDK. So something like defining or configuring the layer outside of in some kind of configuration external configuration file and not in the mod SDK.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's the thing. Right now, we speak about things which are in the and will be in the modding SDK. But as I told earlier, we have also planned to put more control into settings of the server. I spoke for the voting system. It is right now in your prototype a control set on the end of the server owner, and will on shoot and scoot manner push more control into server owner depending on opportunities and requests. So that's totally possible. But we have layer overall first, and then we'll look into game mode, because in our point of view, this is completely related to game mode itself rather than layer. In fact.
All right. We've probably got time for one or two more questions. Are there any more?
I have one.
Go ahead.
I believe it was mentioned in our pre-written questions, but not been answered. Blueprint exposal forms.
So we are looking to expose more functionalities to you thanks to layer overall, and we want to be basically we want to have a consistent approach for it. So anytime we'll work on system overall or into new system, we'll try to make the best of it to open new possibilities. Now for requests on existing stuff, we can probably treat some of them depending on if it's basically fit to our schedule, but we have not started any kind of plan, as far as I know, to give you some kind of request form for it.
And will you be around for us to discuss a few regarding SDK bugs and any other type of like SDK features that we modders would desperately need? Meaning, can we have a direct line of communication with you, or will we have to go through Crispy?
I'd say go through me, or we'll use that roundtable channel. We'll figure that out so requests can come in a more reasonable fashion than just posts, and then I can pass that on to the guys. Just because they're so busy, having a direct line is quite a lot.
Yeah, I think in terms of lately, there has been the last couple of months have been very almost like half a year now. We have been very focused on fixing our own issues in terms of programming side of it. So there has been probably a lack of attention to SDK issues. But I think going forward, like posting a note pair, talking about them in the SDK bug report channel could be a good start. Some is issue with the mods setup, but if there's like general SDK kind of consistent issues, yeah, bring them up there. We can talk about them and bring them up to the relevant programmers that are working on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell that no matter what, when we will roll on the layer overall, we'll probably find a way to basically help you and be more present specifically when we'll start to unveil it, at least, just to make things easier and softer for you.
I'll probably say one final question, if there is one.
Throw another one if nobody else has something. I've talked a lot, so I'll give it a second and let somebody else talk. Okay. This one is general. I have a specific request in it, but we've seen people here. I think this goes into the feature requests or exposal requests, but for me particular, parallel AAS used to be a thing, is no longer. But there are some ways in which that game mode, I think, could be played in the current iterations of Squad. However, the RAAS lane initializer, when you try to set it up under that mode, you run into issues where sometimes it'll choose just one fork or the other fork or both or some odd combination in between. So for tweaks to internal modes like that, are we going to be able to get more functionality and more variation in areas that are lower level in the game, I guess, or stuff that there's already a base for?
Well, it's actually like we'll need to have a look into our graph system to be able to give you more control over what lane graphs are chosen and whatnot. So it is possible. It just will need to take some time.
Yeah, if you've looked at the roadmap as well, you'll notice that there's quite a lot of gameplay changes, improvements, and overhauls there, which means that we'll probably be taking a little bit of look at a lot of our gameplay systems as well over the coming months. So there might be some changes such as that there. I don't know if that specifically is part of that, but that would probably be the time for that to happen.
Alrighty. Well, thank you to everyone for joining us today and giving up your time. And thank you again to the devs for being on hand to answer questions that you guys had. We'll be scheduling another one of these likely next month, make these a monthly basis. So any questions, get them in that Roundtable channel. We'll sort out something for bug reports and probably get something to zap them over to my Slack. But again, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.